Hi, this is Ann Martin, and today we're going to transform this very woolly standard poodle into a historically correct continental. We are going to talk you through placing lines, using anatomy points so that you can follow a pattern, and we're going to make him look gorgeous. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start shaving some hair off. We're going to use a 10 blade because he has not been clipped on his legs since he was in a continental when he was being shown. So the first thing we're going to do is just take this hair off because it's like blinding to see all of this coat. And the reason that we want to use the 10 is just because it's a little gentler on his skin and leaves just a film of hair so that as he's getting used to having his legs shaved, he will have a little bit of a barrier to the elements. Their skin gets sensitive when it's covered in hair, and so it takes it usually a few weeks to a month to adjust to having the shaving done. So when you're thinking about doing your puff here, you want to find your hawk, which is right here, and we're going to lay 2 fingers on top of that, and that's where we're going to start our line. So we don't want to go any lower than that, and we're going to go at a 45-degree angle, creating a line for the rear puff. This is just a matter of deforestation here. So you can see it just leaves just a little bit of a film behind so that he's not quite so bare. So we're going to find his ilium bone here and his ischium bone here, and we want to make sure that we don't go too far up into his rear end until we know where we want to place our rosettes. So I'm just seeing where those bones are so that I can come right in here, hold the hair out of the way, and I'm coming in just right at that point where there's a valley that goes down from where the tail meets the body. There's a valley right here on top of the hind leg. Right now that's as far in as I want to go, and I'm just going forward towards the flank. And then the rosette should ride right to the lowest part of the loin muscle, and we're going to work our way forward on top of the flank, and that's going to come to right where basically the umbilical would be, and that's usually about an inch or so in front of the penis, which we can't even see yet. And you don't have to have your lines for your rosettes even thought of yet. We're just trying to get to the point where we have some sort of clearance here. So you can see the line has started right. This is right where the umbilical is here. And then we're just going to clean that area up. And that's the start of our jacket line. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take all the hair off the inside of his hind leg using the same premise where the lines are going all the way up into his thigh. And you want to have a light hand. You don't want to scrape the skin and cause any kind of added irritation by being in a rush and not allowing the clipper to do the job for you. So just make sure that you're light-handed while you're doing this so that you don't have any more. He's going to have irritation guaranteed at this point here. This is an area that's going to be irritated no matter what you do because it seems to hit the floor and everything else before anything on the rear, and that usually develops some kind of a little agitation. Sometimes it can even actually be like a scab. So that's pretty normal. The tail band is the same as on any other trim. It's approximately 1/4 of the actual tail. So we're just going to get that in. Just shave some hair off just to get rid of the excess here. So we're going to get that all nice and cleaned up. You want to make sure that you clean up around the scrotum. You don't want any extra hair around the testicles. Okay. Now we're just going to come over to the other side, and I'm going to finish trimming in this tail. Can we make it cooler in here? All right, we're just kind of going against the grain to clean that up. Yeah. Good Lord, he's got a lot of hair. Okay, are we good? So one of the things that I like to do as I'm going along is I like to kind of get rid of some excess. So I'm going to take my curved scissors and I'm going to just go right to where I've already clipped, and I'm just going to get rid of some of this hair. I just cannot, you just don't want a lot of excess when you're trying to shape and see the actual lines that you have clipped in when you're doing the rosettes. So you want to make sure that you scissor off your excess before you try to start shaping them in. And I always like a nice pair of curves for this because everything about a rosette is round. So, okay, so you can start to see some shape now that we've gotten some of this excess hair off. And we're gonna move to the front as soon as I get done kind of defoliating here. And we're gonna put in his front legs. So what I like to do is I like to get as much as the clippering of the pattern in as I can, and then we go back and start shaping. So we're gonna go ahead and, oh, got some hair on the inside of this hind leg. Stay. I'm gonna lift this leg and take a look at what we've got going on here. Good. Okay. So then we're gonna feel for the elbow, and I'm gonna err on the very conservative side, and I'm just gonna go right where the leg meets the upper leg meets the lower leg, and I'm just gonna make a line basically where that jacket is gonna start to kind of get a bearing on. Pearl, that's enough. Pearl, that's enough. And I'm just gonna go with the grain down the leg until I can kind of see where I want this puff to be. Now, the problem with this puff is that I haven't set in a bevel line, so you have to be really careful that you don't take it too low until you get the bevel line in. So I'm gonna kind of leave it there, and I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna shave it reverse. Coming up over the elbow. And the reasoning behind coming up over the elbow is that when this dog moves forward with his front leg and reaches, we don't want him to drag his jacket with him. And so even if you have a dog that you need to modify the height on by trimming his jacket lower or whatever it is that you're trying to modify, you can do that and grow it over your shave line, but you want to make sure that the front leg is detached from the jacket. So that's the beginning of that. Now, you can also take excess hair off as you're going. Use these. Just by getting that line shaved in, you can come in and just trim back some of this hair so that you can see what you've done. So you can see that he's just the enormity of his outgrowth. So I haven't really gotten into doing this jacket, but I've just cleared the space so I can actually see what's going on. So I'm going to come over to this leg and I'm going to do the same patterning, finding that crease, and that's where I'm going to start it. Pearl, that's enough. Pearl, I'm going to put you in the crate. Oh my goodness. Okay. And then I'm going to come back and go reverse. And then I'm just going to put this down. And we're pretty close to the same side. So we're going to whack off some of this hair that we've got hanging down here. That way we have a clearer picture. Okay, so now you can see both front legs are put in at this point as just basic. There is no finish, and we still have to shape we have to put in our bevel lines, and that way we can adjust that upper line to accommodate the right balance. And the one thing that you have to remember is that everything is about balance and symmetry and breed profile. And this trim was devised for dogs that were working in the field so that they could come in and compete in the show ring at the national specialty in their breed profile trim, just modified for working in the field. So with that said, we are going to create a trim that has that balance and symmetry, but it also has usability so that it can go out and function in the field. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to take his neckline in so that I can get a better perspective of where I want that 1/3, 2/3 to start shaping his rosettes and placement of the jacket. So we're going to take a look at him, see where his proportions are. I've already looked at his ribbing. I need spray. So we're going to give him a layback of shoulder and start the roundness of his jacket, which is basically like the return of upper arm. And that way we can remove a lot of excess hair to see where we want to put the jacket line and his rosettes. Because that is key to creating a balanced trim when you're doing a Continental and or the HCC. So right now I'm just setting in his layback of shoulder, removing a bunch of excess hair. Okay. So you can start to see the layback of shoulder coming in here. Now obviously on a jacket, you don't want to take it as tight as you would on like a modern trim or a German trim or something like that, because you're having to incorporate it into the jacket. So that's an appropriate length. I really like to have my table elevated as much as possible when I'm doing the bottom portion of the jacket. Stop it, because I can really get myself underneath the dog a little bit better to see what I need to scissor off. So, I mean, he has an enormous amount of hair here, so we're gonna just kind of do a deforestation here before we really start to do our more intricate trimming, so that we can just get a better view here. This is something that I've always been good at, and that is, okay, so you can see that we're just taking lots and lots of hair off here at this point. And you can start to see the shape of the jacket. And the reason that I can do this so quickly is because I understand the layback, return of upper arm, and I understand making sure I keep my jacket round, because even though it's a short, version of the Continental, we still want this to be rounded. We don't want it to be flat and have no shape. So we're going to come from basically the elbow, we're going to work our way back and just kind of get rid of some of this hair. And that way you can start to see a clearer picture of what we're working on. Okay? Now that I have basically where I want his jacket to be, I'm sure I'm probably going to take more off at some point. Maybe this point, we'll see. It's really important that this piece gets done, because you can't work in the middle of the dog and expect it to go well. So you've got to work on the rear and you've got to work on the front and get those shapes and proportions in before you attack the middle, because you want to place your jacket line in the right place. And generally when I'm doing a trim like this, I don't worry about it being perfect, because I have time to modify it as I go. But in front of all of you today, it has to be perfect. So we're gonna really work on making sure that everything is as it should be. So I'm coming back and just kind of removing some of this excess hair here. As you can see that there was a fringe, a coat, you don't want to leave that. And with what I said earlier about whether you want the jacket to be lower, you're going to have to grow that in, because when you're first putting this in, you've got to get all your lines in and get them straight, and then later you can modify it to what you're looking for. So with that said, I'm going to evaluate this dog as a whole picture, and then I'm going to say, okay, where are my 3 pieces, right? So then I can place my jacket line at that 1/3 mark, which is basically right behind where my thumb is. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to come up next to my thumb and I'm going to cut a line in, okay? Because that's where I want my jacket line to be. And you've got to be careful when you're doing this that you just are cutting in a line at this point and not taking off rosette hair, because you can make the rosettes look pretty silly pretty quick. Okay, so basically what I have is the beginning of my line, okay? And then I can take my clipper, and I think I'm going to take a little more hair off. I'm just going to take my big curves and kind of take a little bit more jacket. Okay. Then you can take and hold your rosette. And I actually don't think I've ever, and I'm changing it to a 40 because it'll cut the lines in cleaner and it's not going to irritate his skin up here. So I'm just going to take my clipper and I'm going to make a finger width line that I already cut in with the scissors right up that line that I cut in. So okay. Now is for the magic. We're going to start to set these rosettes in and create a shape as I am motivated to weed whack some more. Okay, now we're going to lower the table. So when you're working on our rosettes, it's really, really super important to use a fine-tooth comb, for one thing, and you want to make sure that you have some kind of spray because you want to be able to keep the hair kind of out of your way. And you're going to scissor your lines in where you want them rather than clip them. So basically we talked about where the lines kind of are. So we don't want to go lower than our loin muscle. And we're going to follow that line that we just clipped in, trying to remove the hair. And we're going to go a little above that valley that I talked about, which is right in through here. And you'll see that I've kind of trimmed them on the top. Now, when you're doing the HCC, you always want to make sure that your rosettes are lower than the top of your jacket. So they're not going to be like a normal Continental in that they're more dome-shaped and on the top and taller. They're going to be a little bit flatter than that on your HCC because this jacket is lower than what we do on the Continental. So they are, ironically, I hope this doesn't confuse you, but if you were to shave this off, it's basically like an oblong that we make into a circle. So we're going to shave some of this excess hair off. And you can see how much shorter that 40 blade is than the 10. Okay. A little bit of it is like braille at this point. So you're just working that circle back over the top. Following that line that I just shaved. So we're going to make these a little smaller because you don't want them to be looking like giant dinner plates on their rear end because then you lose the whole balance of the trim. So basically your rosettes are kind of like what make or break your trim. And they take the longest to do of anything on this trim. As you can see. Okay. Another good clipper for this is the little Divinity that Artero makes. I really like it. I usually carry it in my pocket when I'm setting this trim in because it's small and it's a 50 blade, so it really cleans those lines up really nicely. Okay, now I need to lower the table even more. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my straights and I'm going to stand behind him as much as possible because this table doesn't really allow for that. No, it's fine. It's the bar. No. Okay, so you want him to be standing. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Want him to be standing as straight as possible. I'm going to be looking over the top of him. I need to shave some hair off that's in the way. Okay. And I'm going to take a look at where his tail is. So I'm going to run my finger straight up into his back. So basically, I just take my finger and I just come right up into his back, and I can see like the beginning of where I want to put the line between his rosettes, which should be about a finger's width, which it will be when we're done. But in the meantime, I'm just scissoring as much excess hair as I can to lay the path for the clipper. Okay. So now I can come in with the clipper and shave that line in. And remember, we're doing round, so we want this area to be rounded. Rounded here as well, right? So then we're going to come up here, creating that little pathway between the rosettes. And I'm going to just take and round the top of this rosette in. It's hard when you got a super hairy dog and one side's hairy and the other side isn't. Okay. So there I have the shape. So you can see how I've created that. Okay. So then I'm going to take my curves and my fine-tooth comb, and I can start to finish up the shape on this rosette. And you notice that I don't comb down or out. I always comb up, because if you don't, you change the way the hair lays and you will absolutely ruin your rosettes. So you always want to comb out. All right. So we're going for that nice round look. I'm following that line on the top of his back, and we're creating a round rosette. And I'm just going to trim these down because I know that my jacket is going to be lower, so I don't want them as tall. Okay. Now I'm not going to take them completely down to where they're really flat like a pancake. We don't want that, because I want to see where my jacket ends up being once I have that trimmed in, because we don't even have that started yet. So for right now, we're just basically trying to put this shape in, taking some hair off because we know we don't want them huge. Okay, we're going to take just a little bit more off the backside. Okay. So we have our rosette in, at least the preliminary portion of it. You can see that as I'm scissoring, he's feeling a little sensitive just because he's had this whole area hairy and not been worked on in a while. So, all right. So we have our base rosette in. Okay, and the next thing I usually do is I put the puffs in. I don't know why I do it in that order, but that's what I usually do. So we're gonna go ahead and get these bevels on these puffs and get them shaped, and then we're gonna move into the jacket and pull everything together, making sure that the coat is completely combed out. And this dog has really good feet, so we don't have to worry about lowering our bevel lines to compensate for a flatter foot. So I'm just taking my scissor at a 45-degree angle, scissoring the bevel line in. Okay. And then the same thing on the front foot. It's kind of fun working on a dog that's so hairy because you can see a really dramatic change from what we started with and what we're going to end with. All right. You want to make sure you get all your hairs so that you don't have anything hanging down in your bevel lines, which is when they're really this hairy, sometimes you can miss hairs, so just keep an eye out in case you miss anything. Okay, so we have beveled puffs, and we are going to go ahead and shape these. I'm going to need the hairspray, I think. Oh, thank you. So you can see that the texture on his puffs is a little bit different than it is on his jacket. So this is not an uncommon thing in poodles to have softer, less volume on the puffs than they do have on their jackets. Sometimes it's just a puppy thing that they grow out of and they end up growing in all the density. Sometimes they don't. And in this case, he just doesn't have a lot of density on his puffs. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some hairspray to it just to give it a little bit more oomph so that we can get a good shape on it. So a lot of people have the misnomer that the shape of a puff is supposed to be like a toilet paper roll, but that's not really true. They really should be on a poodle. On a standard poodle, they're more oblong. So what I do is I start at the very base and I kind of trim away that bevel line so that there's no hard lines. And I'm just have a shape in my head of how I want this to look. And again, this is an HCC, so you don't want to leave huge puffs on a dog in an HCC. Remember, it's more of a working style trim. Now, if you're doing a competition or you're doing something like that, you can leave these a little fuller, and it also has to do with the dog. You really have to make sure you understand the dog you're working on. You cannot put little skinny puffs on this trim on a big dog. You want to put a puff on it that's balanced with the trim and it looks appropriate on that dog. Otherwise, it's just going to look like you've got these little thoughts of a puff and it doesn't balance with the dog or the trim. And on him, he's a pretty moderate dog, so we don't have to worry about, leaving a different type of puff on him. We're going to do one that's going to be appropriate to his trim, and that is it's a little bit smaller than show trim because obviously they're in a full Continental and they've got quite a bit of hair. So this one we're not going to do that. It's going to be a little bit more tailored to being out in the field and being able to work. So I just took one of my show dogs running with me at the creek and thought that all the burrs were gone, and Lordy have mercy, did I have a mess. So this makes it a lot easier. And remember, everything about a poodle is up and moving forward, so we don't want to leave our bevel lines drooping anywhere. We want those to be on that upward view. Now, if you have a dog with bad feet, obviously you're not going to want to put them in this trim to start with, and you're going to want to keep your bevel lines a lot lower. But we don't have that case here. We have a dog with great feet. And you can see that that hairspray just gave that coat just a little bit of oomph so that it wants to kind of hold its shape and not be laying flat and frumpy. The other problem is with a dog that has this kind of hair is he's been let go as a woolly mammoth for a while, and so his coat has forgotten how to stand out. It's basically just laying down. So that's the other reason I wanted to spray him with hairspray, because if he gets scissored in this every month, then his coat will have some memory and it'll stand out a little bit better and hold its shape. All right, and then we have the backside that we want to comb up, give a little spritz, and then shape it right in there. Now, generally, we always have a little bit more hair on the back of the front leg than we do on the front, just because we're closing that gap up to give the dog the illusion that it's short-backed. We don't really have to worry about that with this dog because he's very properly balanced. Okay, and then we're just going to give it another. If you tried to do a dog with 3 times this coat density and let him go this long, we'd be here for hours. So, all right. I always like to do the foot mainly on the table because it gives a more natural shape, and I can see how it's going to look when the dog is on the ground. And you can see that it's taking after that more oblong shape. Okay. Now, he still has a nice rosette, or a nice puff. It's not skinny and look like it's been taken off with an attachment comb. You do not want that short of a puff. They've got to have that round shape in the middle and beveled at the top and beveled at the bottom. Okay. So while I'm up front, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this jacket. And one of the things that I do on my Continentals is I always take this line up higher on the front of the front leg because I like the dogs to look like they're more elevated and more upstanding. And so by taking that hair out of the jacket there, you can actually get that look. So I'm just going to hold his head up, and I'm going to do a little finish work on his jacket here while we're up front. So you just are going to bevel this just a little bit higher, and this line in here is going to come shorter. We don't want this dog to look short-legged. We want him to look upright and look elegant. It's a breed that's very controversial in that we want them powerful and we want them to have body and substance so that they can do their job, but we also still want them to be elegant, which actually works in their favor for, you know, being able to haul big birds in the water, because if they have a nice long neck and their front end is set on them properly, then they have all the mobility and athleticism to be able to bring Canadian geese out of the water, which some of my dogs do. Okay, so you can see that that line is starting to change to a more upward flow instead of downward. Now, we didn't worry about that when we were just you know, taken a ton of hair off, but now we're starting to kind of tailor the jacket in more to where we want it. And it doesn't need to have all that hair, and now we can have some shape, okay? And then we're gonna go ahead and move to the back puff. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and just, I combed up the back of the front puff to make sure I got all the hairs and lumps out that I wanted to get out. And so this is the best way to look at this area of the front puff, because you can miss this whole piece on the inside. You'll miss it if you don't sit in this position or stand in this position and make sure you got it. All right, so that one is good to go. So now we're gonna go ahead, and I see some stuff I wanna fix as I'm moving back towards the hind puff. So at this angle, you can actually see some of your lines for your rosettes that need to just to be tidied up just a little bit. So you wanna make sure you have your clipper and you're tidying that, and then I'm just gonna ever so slightly come in here and kind of finish that line for my jacket. So that's about as good as that gets. I have right here, I want to make sure that's a defined point. So now we're going to do, now I think I'm going to shave some hair off. I'm just going to get rid of some of this hair on the other side just because it's really distracting, because it's like hanging in so much. I'm just going to kind of do a little weed whacking here. Vivo's not going to know how to act with his new hairdo. You want to make sure that you're very careful around the testicles, because the skin on the testicles is usually very easy to cut. So you just want to be careful. But you still want to get it all off. All right. I think that's probably enough. Okay. Now I have a clearer picture of what I'm doing. Okay. Now, the premise of the rear puff is that it is the same shape as the one on the front, but it's at a 45-degree angle. So with that said, the way that I approach it is I usually do the outside or the inside parallels, right? So that's what's important. And a lot of times I have to go back and fix my bevel because I always miss this part. So I'm gonna just shift him to be more facing me with his rear. And I'm gonna use the inside of the parallel here is gonna be first because most dogs are cowhocked. So I'm just gonna scissor that line in so I can kind of see where I am. And then I'm gonna come back with my small curves and I'm gonna shape that in. Now, most dogs, and he's no exception, they will pick their hind legs up and they move with their hocks slightly closer together, which is perfectly normal. So you're always gonna usually have the inside of your puffs be shorter than the outside. Okay, so you just want to, because he's so hairy, we just keep kind of going back and reshaping because there's so much extra hair. Okay, and then I'm going to pick up that hawk and I'm going to come from underneath at a 45-degree angle and I'm going to scissor slightly upwards without taking the actual hawk hair off because I know I want this at a 45. And then I'm going to set that leg back down. And I'm going to take a look at it from the side. And then I'm going to bevel from the bottom. I'm just going to bevel it up from the bottom because that way I still create that round shape and I retain the outline of what I'm looking for, and the dog is on its feet the way it's supposed to be, standing, so that it looks proper when I stack the dog. So you can see I'm still not taking that hawk hair off because I want to see what that looks like once I have the rest of the puff in. You can call them puffs or bracelets, or everybody has a term, but all means the same thing. I'm going to go at that 45-degree angle from the back leg towards the bevel line, which helps me create the shape. And you can see I'm using my comb extensively, which is really important. And when I'm done, what I'm looking for is a shape that balances with this shape, only it's tilted at a 45-degree angle. But that the shape and the size this, and the shape and the size this, they're symmetrical. And you don't want to have a ton of hawk hair on a dog that has a good hawk, which he has. So we're just gonna slightly tip that so that it blends right into that puff. And then we have our shape. So you can see that this and this are of equal length, and the shape is the same, it's just at a 45-degree angle. Okay, so now we're gonna shake things up and we're gonna get this jacket put in. And I still see some stuff I need to shave. And that's what this is all about. When you're taking a dog from raw into a completely different trim, you're always going to see stuff that you're going to want to pick at because you can't get it all in one go. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go and take a look at what I've got going on here in this jacket. And he needs to stay forward. Now I'm using a fine-tooth comb because it's kind of going through, and at this stage of the game with this much overgrowth, you're going to get nitties, which is just like all this hair that is not used to being combed out, and it just kind of makes it difficult to scissor unless you use a comb that'll get it out. Okay. So I like to come at the jacket from this angle, so I'm going to stay seated, and I'm going to use my big curves, and I'm going to start shaping this in. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this line up at the jacket. Now, I don't like a perfectly straight line here. I like it to curve slightly forward because that gives that illusion of moving forward, and it just seems to really kind of be more attractive than the straight line from here straight down. I've seen that done quite a bit, and it's not my preference. So I usually angle my jackets on my Continentals as well. So we're going to do that on the HCC. And we're just going to get this line cleaned up. Stop. Stop. So what I have is a lot of hair underneath that I kind of want to get rid of, and I've got to be careful because I don't want my jacket to be taken up too tight. But we're going to take our straights and we're going to go straight into the area between his front legs, because that's the demarcation of how long we want it. And then we're just going to angle it ever so slightly into the belly, but we're still holding our round shape. The only place it's not round is on the very bottom of the jacket. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this side coat and we're going to start creating the shape of the jacket. And we got a lot going on here, so we're going to just kind of get in here and scissor off some of this hair. Because remember, this is a working trim. Yes, we want it to be attractive, but it is a working trim, so it has to have a length that makes sense. And if you leave it really full, like you're trying to do a Continental, then that doesn't make any sense. So we're just kind of taking hair off at this point. And again, when you have a dog that's this overgrown, it usually takes a couple of trims to really get it set exactly like you want it. But we're going to work towards getting it exactly like we want it today. And I use a lot of spray. I know that's foreign to some people, but I like to be able to have my scissors gliding over the coat, and it keeps the static down, keeps the hair particles from flying into your nose. And you notice that now I'm working on the middle of the dog. I have my front and my rear area done. So now I can work in the middle and I don't end up making this dog look like a freight train. Okay. All right. So I'm going to come back to the front, which is going to torture my cameraman, but I'm going to come back to the front because I need to take more off the front. I'm just going to stay standing. And I'm going to bring this shoulder in so that I can finish shaping my jacket. Yeah. Stay. And then I'm just going to be coming right in to my top line and my neck area. Okay, this is distracting. I'm gonna wax some of that off. Okay, I'm just gonna take and really comb through this jacket with a big comb so I can get all the lumpy bumpies to show themselves. And come right into this shoulder layback, into the top line, and setting the top line here. And that way I'm putting in my ribbing, which on the Continental we don't really worry about, but this trim is a little bit different because they don't have all the neck hair. So coming down into the roundedness of my jacket. Now, one of the things that you want to keep from happening is you don't really want to have like a torpedo belly or a torpedo look to the jacket. You want it to resemble the Continental as much as possible in the shape, not the length, but in the shape. Okay. All right, so now I'm gonna lower my table. When we're doing this portion, I don't like them to be on a leash because it distorts the neck skin and the hair. So we want to make sure that we're taking a really good view of that, and we're going to place our neckline and our top line. And then just like in the Continental, we do not want a broken line. So we're going to place our line here. So this is our back. This is our top line over here. And we're going to come up into our neck from the side first. And I'm going to use my big curves and scissor our neck in on top of our shoulder layback, coming up the back of the head. And you can see there's no line. which is really important. Okay, so we have hair that's kind of changing the look of stuff, but you can start to see how this is all pulling together as we're creating this shape on the back of the neck. So just like we were talking about, the rosette and the jacket line need to be in sync. So this has to be smaller than this piece here, okay? And then it's just probably ever so slightly needs to come off. But we're gonna finish getting this line in here. Now you see I'm holding the dog's head in a natural position so that I can get a view of how I want that neck piece to look. Okay. You can see how streamlined and sporty it's starting to look. And he looks very handsome in this haircut. Okay, so while I am working on that, I'm gonna actually take some height off of my rosettes so that they are in balance with the jacket. So you can see I just need to take off a little bit more. This line needs to be defined. Okay, so you can see that his rosettes are just slightly shorter or right at the same length as this area of his neck that we've just created, and back. Well, it's basically his back, not his neck. But it works because it flows right into this without being too tall. Okay, so with that, we're gonna kind of come to the front of this mop and give him some eyeballs. So I'm just gonna take my scissor and I'm gonna cut some hair off at this point because it's so overwhelming. He cannot see a darn thing.
Are you gonna do it spaced from where you're standing?
Yes. Okay, so you're gonna use your bevel line, your clipper line that you did the face, and you're gonna take your scissors and you're gonna create that bevel right at that clipper line. And you can see that I'm holding my scissor almost flat when I'm going in there because I don't want to take away any of this beveling yet. So I want this heavy at this point. And I'm gonna just have to probably do the whole head because it's so voluminous. Okay, so he should be able to have eyeballs and the beveling should not take away from the length of his foreface, as they are to have equal planes, meaning this muzzle and his back skull should be of equal length. I'm gonna hold his ear back to kind of see how much ear hair I've got going on here because I can't really tell. Okay, all right. So this is a top knot that is under a little scrutiny at times, but it is a blended top knot. They should have beveling so that their expression is pretty, which means you don't want to take this area super short. I have to take these over the eyes, because if you do, you give them the surprise look, which is not pretty. So you see you have a nice, you can see his eyes. It's got a little bit of beveling, but he still has to be able to work in the field. Okay? So with that said, I've already pre-sprayed his top knot with hairspray just to kind of give him a little bit of oomph because it's been so long that he his hair wants to just lay flat. So it's not a big round top knot to start with. It's more of a flatter top knot that's blended into the ear. And it's obviously, if you have a dog with good coat, it's, you know, gonna hold up a little bit better and not be so flat. But you want it to come all the way back to the corner of the ear. Let's see if I can reactivate the hairspray. We're gonna see if we can get this to, oh, there we go. See, if it stands up, then it's a little bit easier to shape. Okay, so it's a little bit flatter than a normal top knot, but it should coincide with the amount of neck hair you have. So I've left a little bit of extra neck hair on him because I think it looks really pretty on him. So we're gonna incorporate that neck hair into our top knot, making sure that we blend over the ear, coming down into the neck. Okay. Now, the way that I normally set my ears, you know, once we get this neckline in, then I'll talk about how to set the ear in, which there is some controversy over this, but it is the ear is supposed to meet the nose. So even though most poodles don't have ears that meet the nose, we still want the hair on the ears to meet the nose at least, because it gives the whole top knot and headpiece the appropriate expression. Okay, so when you look at him, his ear is just about where we want it. Now, if you were going to have a dog with a full ear and you were setting this pattern in, what you could do is you could actually take an E-comb and take from here down, take the E-comb and take the hair off. But as this stands right now, you can see that that's a really pleasing look to the face. You've given him expression. He's got a nice rounded top knot, but it's not too high. And then it blends beautifully into the ear, which is basically the perfect length. And then he has this really pretty transition into his neck and into his back. And the last thing we have to do is his tail. All right, so with the tail, you notice that I cut the end off when I was clippering him, so we don't need all that excess hair. So then I'm gonna take and comb everything kind of downward towards the bevel. And then I'm gonna take my big curves and I'm gonna scissor the bevel just like I did on the puffs. All the way around. Stop.
Sorry. What would you like to eat today?
What?
What do you want to eat today?
What are we eating today? I don't care. What do you want to eat today? I'm always down for Asian food. I think I was Asian in another life, as much as I love it. I got a new Thai place opened in Woodland, and it's really good. I was so thrilled. Okay. Okay. So the tail should be in balance with the puffs. So his tail is growing out from being shaved, but it's going to be right about the right length to go with his puffs. So we don't really have to scissor a tremendous amount off of it, but I always start from the bottom bevel and work my way up and making sure that I keep it round. It's really easy to make it flat if you don't keep concentrating on making it round. Not round in the shape of it because it's oblong, but round in that your sides are all rounded. They're not flat. And then I usually shake it out, see what I missed, and then lift it up, and you can see I have a whole bunch of hairs. Okay, and we have it.
All right, guys, if you like this video, make sure to check out the other videos we have out there, and hope to see you guys next time.